Welcome to the Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsville, Texas, USA. Another episode of TNT, the Twisted New Testament with Rabbi Stuart Federow from Houston, Texas. Tonight's topic, do we inherit original sin? Are we going to be guilty from that? That is where we're headed tonight. So, Rabbi, welcome back, and looking forward to our fun topical
thank you. It's good
discussion.
To be here.
Right on.
What were the, I forgot already, what were the references from TORAH, from Tanakh?
I did not write them down. I thought it was Ezekiel was one of them.
No, Ezekiel 18.
That's the one where it says we're not held. Right. The other one I think was
and the questioner said that contrasted with another passage, and I forgot where that was in.
I was thinking it was in Exodus or something. I thought. I could be wrong though.
Wait a minute. Huh. Okay.
It looks like we're live on YouTube. Pretty sure we got everything right in here. Oh, my nose is itching also. But we don't necessarily need that to go with where we're going. I know Romans 5:12 is the one you had pulled up, which is really a major, a key point, right? Which says, "Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into this world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." Jibber jabber. So that's what it kind of feels like sometimes. All right, what are you looking up right now, Rabbi?
I got it. Numbers chapter 14, verse 18.
Numbers 14, 18. Okay, good. All right, cool. Okay. So there you go. So that's our topic. Do we inherit original sin?
You know, the thing about asking me these questions is that, you know, I have sometimes a weird sense of humor, right?
Yep.
So my answer is no. Okay, next question. I know, I do that every week, don't I?
That was the fastest show we've ever had.
Yes,
Thank you for
I know,
tuning
but
in.
It was perfect, though, wasn't it?
It was. Indeed, yes.
Okay, so Romans chapter 5, verse 12 through 21. Do you have that up?
I don't have it on screen. If you'll give me a few minutes and I'll have it up there. I've got one of my screens I took down to edit it and I forgot to replace it. So go ahead and read off if you want.
Okay.
Let's see.
Oh. 210. Okay. So,
I just realized what that one was. I deleted. Never mind.
Okay. So, Romans 5:12 through 21. Just as sin came into the world through one man, and death came through sin, and so death spread to all because all have sinned. Sin was indeed in the world before the law, but sin is not reckoned when there is no law. Yet death exercised dominion from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sins were not like the transgression of Adam, who is a type of the one who was to come. So much in that to to discuss.
Why don't you just break, if there is, let's just break that down then. I mean, it's kind of added in the title anyways, Romans.
Right. First thing to discuss is, did Adam and Eve bring sin into the world? Okay. I'm sorry. Start over. Did Adam and Eve bring death into the world? Okay. Death spread to all because all have sinned. Sin was indeed in the world before the law, but sin is not reckoned when there is no law. Therefore, if there's no law against something, therefore you can't sin. So there's no biblical law that says if I drive my car and run over you, therefore it's not a sin.
Right, because it's not written down if it wasn't written down.
Right. In other words, there are moral and ethical things. Let me rephrase that. There are immoral things and unethical things that still might be legal. And we all know about them. Okay? We all, you know, they may be immoral, they may be unethical, but they are legal. So just because there's no law doesn't mean there's no sin. That's right. One thing. All right. Second thing, It's the whole original sin bit. So for that, let me just add this to my collection of verses to be looked at in a minute. Okay, so let's go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Okay, or now let's skip to chapter 2. Okay.
Pardon me. It'll be on screen in a few
Okay.
seconds.
Judaism flatly rejects the idea of original sin. What is exactly original sin? Original sin means that the original sin was Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, disobeyed God. That was the original sin. Because they sinned, they brought death into the world. Because we die, we suffer because they sinned. Okay, we are going to die. The reason we're going to die is because Adam and Eve brought death into the world when they transgressed against the laws of God. That, in a nutshell, is original sin. Judaism rejects the idea, okay, on a number of grounds.
Genesis 2 is on screen.
I'm sorry, what?
Genesis 2 is on screen.
Genesis 2 is on screen. So take a look. Take a look at chapter 3. Okay.
Going for the snake.
Yeah.
The serpent.
You snake in the grass. Notice nowhere does it say that the snake is the devil. Nowhere in the text does it say the snake is Satan. The devil made me do it.
Right.
It is a snake.
Right.
Da 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 da. It's a snake.
There you go.
Just because a person if a person leads you to do something that's wrong, does that make that person the devil? No, you're still a person. Well, the serpent, being more subtle than any other beast, is mischievous and likes to cause trouble. It doesn't make him the devil. Okay. So the serpent, how many trees in the Garden of Eden were they not supposed to touch?
2.
Say again?
2.
2. Most people say 1. And only 1 is stated, but the other one God keeps them away from.
Gotcha.
And this is very important. The first tree is the tree of the knowledge of the difference between good and evil. Okay? Or more accurately, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But knowing good and knowing evil means you know the difference between the two. Right. Otherwise, you don't know the difference. Otherwise, you don't know good and you don't know evil. You only know good and know evil when you see that there's a difference between them. So, tree of the knowledge of the difference between good and evil is just as good a name as the more literal translation of knowing the knowledge of good and evil. Okay. So, what does God tell Adam and Eve not to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? We're going to come back to that. They take the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and all of a sudden they know that they are naked. And what is the characteristic of being naked? What's the issue with being naked?
You're exposed, or you're exposing yourself to others, or you're not covered.
And so what? What's the matter with being exposed?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm asking a question here.
Well, to them, it wouldn't have been anything because they didn't have any context of being unexposed.
But they now had the difference between good and evil, and they knew that exposure could be a bad thing.
Okay.
They would feel exposed. They would feel, what does it mean to be exposed? It means, threatened.
Right.
When a person is naked in public, they feel threatened. They feel exposed. Okay. Mm-hmm. So now they know the difference between good and evil. All right. Why does God kick them out of the Garden of Eden? William, plenty of times where I'm going to talk to some Christian, they'll say, oh, well, I've read the Bible backwards and forwards, and I know it cold. I have read it through it 10, 20 times, and I'll ask them the simplest, basic questions about the Bible, and they look at me with deer in the headlight eyes. the question, number one go-to question for me in that instance, in that circumstance, is why did Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden? The answer is explicitly clear. Take a look at Genesis chapter 3. Okay.
Okay. Oh, Genesis 3.
Genesis chapter 3. We're skipping.
Okay.
We're going to have to come back. Okay.
All right. I'm not sure why my stream did not show up on Facebook. I thought I'd double check that. We're on YouTube.
Well, I've got it on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube's good, but I like having it on Facebook also. I don't know why it didn't actually show up. Maybe I typed in something wrong.
Right.
It's okay. I'll paste the link here in just a second. Let everybody know. Okay, so Genesis chapter 3.
Genesis chapter 3. Take a look at verse 22.
Okay, it's up on the screen now. And
okay, so what it says is, and the eternal God said, behold, the man has become as one of us to know good and evil, and now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the eternal God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. He drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim, and the flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. The answer to the question, why did Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, was not because they sinned. The word sin never appears in the first 3 chapters. They're never called sinners. They're never told that what you did was a sin. The first time the word sin is used in the Bible is with Cain regarding his jealousy for Abel and how it could lead to sin, but he can lord over it. He can be the master of sin.
right.
Okay. So what it says here is that human beings had become like one of us. Who's us? God is speaking. Who else knows the difference between good and evil in heaven? Who else is in heaven besides God?
According to the Christians, Jesus is.
Yeah, well, according to John, but not according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But at any rate,
Right.
John makes it look like he pre-existed. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he just was born. And
Right.
Mark, he was born as a human, and then God adopted him. But that's another issue. Okay. The other group that's in heaven that knows the difference between good and evil and are eternal are the angels.
Mm-hmm.
So God is saying the man has become as one of us because God and the angels both are immortal, and God and the angels know the difference between good and evil.
Right.
So man, Adam and Eve are like God and the angels because at this point they know the difference between good and evil. And in order to separate them from the tree of life so that they will not become completely like God and the angels, which is to become immortal, they are kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And it explicitly says this, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the eternal God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden. So the whole purpose of them getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden was not because they sinned,
was to keep them from
but
eating from the
explicitly,
tree of life.
exactly, to keep them away from the tree of life. Now, logic, hello, think of this intelligently. If I have to take the fruit of the tree of life to become immortal, I'm already mortal. Adam and Eve did not bring death into the world. Death was part of the human creation from the moment animals and humans were created. Why, when God says, be fruitful and multiply, why? To replace yourselves when you die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here it's explicitly clear that God doesn't want Adam and Eve to also become immortal. And look, they ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil once, and it made them know the difference between good and evil forever, and it made their descendants forever know the difference between good and evil. So all you have to do with that tree is to eat it once, and it has far-reaching effects forever. Same thing with the tree of life. If you eat it once, you become immortal forever, and so do your descendants. No different than the tree of life.
Interesting.
It says, lest he put forth his hand and take the tree of life and eat once and live forever. Not and keep eating, and the more often you eat it, the more you live forever. It's just eat and you live forever.
Right.
Okay.
That's really cool. So it wasn't punishment at all.
Well, in my personal opinion, how could it be a punishment?
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge of good and evil is what makes us responsible for our choices between good and evil. Okay, take a look at American jurisprudence. What does it mean to have, what's it called? The insanity plea. It means at the time the crime was committed, I didn't know the difference between good and bad. Therefore, I'm not held responsible for my doing bad because I didn't know the difference. Adam and Eve become responsible for their choices between good and evil because they knew the difference between good and evil. It's called growing up. Children, okay, don't know any better. Okay, if a child does something really horrible, okay, you're a lot more lenient because you're teaching them the difference between good and evil. Okay, once a person knows the difference between good and evil, they become responsible for their choices between good and evil. So what Eve did is make her husband Adam grow up like our wives do. Hi, Christy. Like our wives do. Okay, and that's what she did for her husband. In the instant that she had it, she had another instant to choose of whether or not to give the fruit of the tree of knowledge between good and evil to her husband, and she chose to give it to him because in that split second, she knew that maturity is good, responsibility for your behavior is good, and she wanted her husband to grow up.
Okay, question. Okay. Sadiq Vanderhoof says, but didn't God tell them not to eat it, and they ate it anyway? Wouldn't that be sin?
But how would they know disobeying God is a bad thing?
Right. There was no context for them. They had no, right.
There's no knowledge. It's not that there's no context, it's there's no knowledge. If they don't know disobeying God is bad, is wrong, is an evil thing, is a sin, they're not held responsible or culpable for disobeying God. That's why the Bible never calls what Adam and Eve did a sin.
Right.
Okay, this is straight out of the text. I'm not looking at commentaries. I'm just based on what the biblical text says in the Torah and Genesis. Okay, this is how it's described. And the text says, lest he put forth his hand and take the tree of life and eat and live forever. It means that until they eat the tree of life fruit once, they're mortal.
Right. Very good.
So they did not bring Adam and Eve did not bring death into the world. We don't die because they sinned, and there's no such thing as original sin.
Nice.
Okay, now, so this Romans 5:12 and 1 Corinthians 15, where it's repeated, sin coming into the world through one man, and death came through sin. No, death was part of the natural order of creation from the moment of creation, and that's why they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, so they wouldn't become immortal, as well as knowing the difference between good and evil, like God and the angels. Okay, now, all right, so another thing I want you to do is take a look at the old quote, the best quote of all, Deuteronomy 24:16. If there was anything ever I would beg somebody to memorize, this would be it. Okay. The Deuteronomy 24:16 covers two issues in contrast with Christianity.
All right.
All right.
Coming up on your screen shortly.
Okay. So, Deuteronomy 24:16. Deuteronomy 24:16. When Christians start talking about their Jesus died for your sins and all this is what I would immediately start repeating like a tape recording. Okay, Deuteronomy 24 verse 16 reads, "The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin." You know, when Christians come by my house, gee, they stopped doing it. They must know, they have marked my house somehow. When they come by, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, whatever, and I ask them to read this out loud, and they read it, "The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man should be put to death for his own sin." And I say, well, what did Jesus do for you? He died for my sin, but it says every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Jesus cannot die for your sin.
All right,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. Okay.
Okay.
So, if I was the Christian arguing you on this point, here's what I would say. Jesus isn't the Father or the Son. He is God himself. The person who sins, the person who sins himself will get punished for his sins. So like me, if I sin, that says my dad can't die for me, and this says I can't die over my son because that didn't work. But Jesus, however, can die for your sins to cleanse you. That's
okay,
what they
and
would
my
say.
response to that is, who did the dying? Was it Jesus the God on the cross, or was it Jesus the human on the cross?
And was it
If it was Jesus the human on the cross, then all they have is human sacrifice, which God calls an abomination and something he hates in Deuteronomy 13, I believe.
And if it's Jesus the God?
Well, my God cannot die. Sorry about yours.
Right.
It's that simple, because if God is God, God cannot die.
And the thing about it is, that's what they would say. Well, he didn't die because he rose in 3 days. So there you go. The guy lost his weekend for you.
Nobody died for your sins. Therefore, you're still stuck with your sin, aren't you?
Right. Exactly. Nice.
They keep trying to. It's a circular argument.
Right.
Jesus died for my sin. Well, Jesus was God. Well, no, it was a human. Well, then you got a human sacrifice. Oh, but he was God. Well, then your God died. No, he was human. Well, then circular.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So Deuteronomy 24:16 first tells us that the guilt of parents doesn't get onto the children, and the guilt of the children doesn't get on the parents. Rather, every man is put to death for his own sin. Each person's guilt is on his own head.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So with that knowledge, okay, and also the person calling was asking about Ezekiel 18. So let's go to Ezekiel 18.
Okay.
Okay. The entire chapter 18 of the book of Ezekiel is about two issues. The whole thing is really about just two issues. The first issue is the lie that someone else can die for your sin. And the second lie, that you inherit guilt from previous people's sin. Previous generation's sin, you get their guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ezekiel 18, verse 1.
And not to mention how you become righteous.
And how you become righteous again, how you become back on the right side of the law.
Right.
Okay.
So 18:1 coming up to you in about 10 seconds.
Right. Ezekiel chapter 18, verses 1 and following. It's really the whole chapter, but we don't have to look at the whole chapter.
Yeah.
That would be a little bit lengthy. Okay. The word of the Lord came unto me again, saying, what mean you that you use this proverb concerning the land of Israel, saying, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge? As I live, saith the eternal God, you shall not have occasion any more to use this proverb in Israel. Behold, all souls are mine. As the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sins, it shall die. So it's saying that you don't inherit sin.
Right.
Okay? And what does it mean, this proverb, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? If a parent eats something sour, that means they've sinned. And if the kids, their mouth gets, reacting to the to the sourness, okay, of the grapes, it means they're wind up getting the guilt for the parents.
Right.
And God says, I don't want to hear that anymore. Don't use that proverb, that saying in Israel. I don't want to hear it anymore. All souls are mine. The soul of the Father, the soul of the Son is mine. But it's the soul that sins is the one of the two that dies. And now look what it says. Verse 5. If a man is just and does what is lawful and right, and has not eaten upon the mountains, neither has lifted up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, neither has defiled his neighbor's wife, nor has come near to a woman in her impurity, and has not wronged any, but has restored his pledge for debt, has taken nothing by robbery, has given his bread to the hungry, and has covered the naked with a garment. He that is not given forth upon interest, neither has taken any increase, that has withdrawn his hand from iniquity, has executed true justice between man and man, walked in my statutes, kept my ordinances, and to deal truly, he is just, he shall surely live, saith the Lord God. And if he begets a son that's a bad guy, a robber, a shedder of blood, and that does to a brother any of these things, where he is himself has not done any of these things, for he has even eaten upon the mountains and defiled his neighbor's wife, wronged the poor and needy, taken by robbery, not restored the pledge, not lifted up his eyes to the idols, and has committed abomination, has given forth upon interest, and has taken increase, should he live? He shall not live. He has done all these abominations. He shall surely be put to death. His blood shall be upon him. It doesn't say his blood shall be upon the righteous.
Right.
It doesn't say his blood shall be upon an animal, because every one of these transgressions are on purpose. They're not by accident. Okay? His blood, his culpability for his behavior is upon him, nobody else. And lo, if the bad guy begets a son that sees all his father's sins, which he has done, and considers and does not do them, that has not eaten upon the mountains, neither has lifted up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, nor defiled his neighbor's wife, neither has wronged any, has not taken naught for pledge, neither has taken by robbery, has given his bread to the hungry, and has clothed the naked with a garment, that was withdrawn his hand from the poor, and has not received interest or increase, executed mine ordinances, walked in my statutes, he shall not die for the sin of his father, he shall surely live. Each person is judged by their own actions. As for the father, because he cruelly oppressed, committed robbery on his brother, and did that which is not good among his people, behold, he dies for his sin. Okay? Look at verse 20. The soul that sins, it shall die. The son shall not bear the sin of the father with him, neither shall the father bear the sin of the son with him. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon the righteous, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon the wicked. It doesn't say the wickedness of the wicked shall be on the righteous. That would be equally stupid as saying the righteous of the righteous shall be on the wicked. It makes no sense.
Right. Now here's, before we even read this next verse, it's important for people out there, Christian world, to realize this is a book of prophecy, meaning this is talking about the future times.
Absolutely.
It's not talking about past times. It's talking about future times. So if there was any possibility of a prophecy stating that you must accept Jesus, the Son of God, this would be one of the best places to put it.
Yeah, really. Good point. Not there.
21?
21. But if the wicked turns from his sins that he's committed, keeps all my statutes, does what is lawful and right, he shall surely live, he shall not die. None of his transgressions that he has committed shall be remembered against him. For his righteousness that he has done, he shall live. Have I any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, saith the eternal God, and not rather that he should return from his ways and live? But when the righteous turns away from his righteousness and commits sin, and does according to all the abominations that the wicked man does, shall he live? None of his righteous deeds that he has done shall be remembered, for his trespass that he has trespassed, for the sin which he has sinned, for them shall he die. So point after point after point is made. Mm-hmm. You don't inherit the guilt of sin committed by someone else. Your children don't inherit the sin you commit. Now let's be clear about something, because this is very important. Okay, there are plenty of times in the Bible where one person commits a sin and other people suffer as a result of that sin. It doesn't mean, look, if I pollute the world, if I pollute the air, then my descendants are going to have to breathe that air. And if they get cancer from that air and die, they died as a result of my polluting, but their death doesn't take away my sin because I polluted.
And their death wasn't caused because they deserved to die for your sin.
Exactly. Okay. There is a cause and effect. If I pollute, that's the cause. The effect is that people can get sick from breathing it, and some of them might die. But saying that they died to take away my guilt for my sin is not what the Bible ever says. That's what Christianity says about Jesus. That's not what Judaism or the Bible or God ever said.
Right.
Okay. The wickedness of the wicked shall be upon the wicked, and the righteousness of the righteous shall be on the righteous. Okay, now we go to his original question. Okay, he wanted us to look at Numbers chapter 14, verse 18.
Okay.
Okay, Numbers chapter 14, verse 18.
All right, I'm pulling it up now. 1 second. So as I scroll to the top.
Yep. We're not going to be here for more than a couple seconds.
Okay.
But.
All right, you got it. Should be coming up any second now.
Okay. Okay. Verse 18. The Eternal is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the sin of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. This is an exact quotation, partial quotation, that is found in the Ten Commandments. And so I want you to now, I said we'd be here for just a couple seconds.
Sure.
Okay, take a look at Exodus 20.
Okay.
Okay, Exodus 20, and it's verse 5.
Okay. You shall not bow yourself to them, nor serve them, for I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me.
Right. So the 5 words that were not in what we read from Numbers, of them that hate me.
Right.
But the rest is pretty much the same. Okay, the false gods. For I, the Eternal your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity, the sin of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me. Okay, so how can we have in Deuteronomy 24:16, the sin of the parents is not, the kids don't inherit the guilt of the sin of the parents. Okay, we had that also in Ezekiel 18, that the righteousness of the righteous is on the righteous, and the transgression of how it was worded, we just had it. The violation of the law is on the head of the ones who violated it. Okay, the wickedness of the wicked is on the wicked. Okay, how can we have that and compare that with this verse 5 of Exodus 20, which is in the second commandment? All right. Now, it seems to me that a lot of people bend over backwards to try to explain this, and they neglect something that's very important. Okay? First thing they'll show, which is a quick, easy answer that answers the question. It's a correct answer. Okay? It says, of those that hate me. So they'll state, which is true, that if the next generation continues to hate God, they are punished for their own hatred of God, not the hatred of the previous generations. I'm not saying that's not true. That is true.
Right.
Okay, so when it says, of them that hate me, it means that they're being punished for their own hatred of God, which they may have learned from previous generations, but it's their own hatred of God that gets them punished. Okay, now, I don't think that's what's really going on here. Okay, and I think we're going to have to get into this again. Well, at any rate, if we get there, we get there. Okay, Exodus 20, the paragraph, the second commandment is no other gods, no graven image. Other gods, graven image is subsumed under the title of idolatry. So the paragraph in which this verse 5 is found regards idolatry. Why all of a sudden is it talking about children and, visiting the children with the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me in a paragraph that's talking about idolatry?
Right.
Okay. And here you have to understand Hebrew grammar. You have to understand linguistics, language, the grammar of language and how they work. What is a preposition? A preposition is a word that goes with a verb, and it's a characteristic of the language. What preposition is used? And I've said this before rather often on our show because this comes up every so often. Okay. Give me 1 second here. Okay. I can lean against a wall, and I can lean upon a wall. If I lean upon a wall, I'm doing the same thing as leaning against the wall. Because in English, to lean against and to lean upon mean basically the same thing, right?
Right.
Okay. But you put the word upon or you put the word against in a different sentence, and it can alter the meaning of the sentence. And that's what's going on here. In Hebrew, translating it literally, we would say, I hit the nail in a hammer. Well, in English, you don't say, I hit the nail in a hammer. You say, I hit the nail with a hammer.
Right.
In Hebrew, the preposition that's used is in, and in English, the preposition that is used is with. Right?
Right.
Okay. So how this is translated, or mistranslated, I should say, creates this illusion that God is getting after the children for the sin committed by the parents, and that's not what's going on here. Verse 5 of Exodus 20, part of the Ten Commandments, in the paragraph on idolatry, is actually about child abuse. Reread this line. Okay, they shall not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, the eternal your God, am a jealous God, visiting the sin of the fathers upon the children. Reread that. For I, the eternal your God, am a jealous God, visiting the sin of the parents against the children to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me. In other words, the sin that was committed by the fathers against the children. It's child abuse. Why does it say third and fourth generation? Because most people will get to know their children, please God. Most people will get to know their grandchildren. And if you're really, really lucky, you might get to know your great-grandchildren.
Right, that's true.
But you're not going to get to know your great-great-grandchildren. Mm-hmm. People don't live that long, by and large.
Wow. So
if I can influence the third and fourth generation to hate me, or my understanding of this, child abuse, okay, I can sin against the third and fourth generation. I can sin against my children by abusing them. I can sin against my grandchildren. I can sin against my great-grandchildren. I am the first, children of the second, grandchildren of the third, great-grandchildren of the fourth generation. And why is this in the paragraph on idolatry? Quite simply because how a person views God is going to be heavily based in the early part of their life on how they view their parents. And if parents abuse a child, the child is going to have a warped view of God. And God cannot let that go. Mm-hmm. God's reputation is on the line. Okay? So God, being a jealous God, a zealous God for his own reputation, cannot allow parents to abuse the children. They get into heavy trouble for it, is what this is saying. And if you take a look at what I call the professional atheists, Hitchens and Harris and all these people, okay, if you look at their lives, they always had some sort of major trauma: divorced parents, alcoholic parents, drug-addicted parents, divorce. Something in their past was traumatic for them, and their view of God was warped by it. And that's what this is talking about. Okay? God is a jealous God visiting the sin of the parents committed against their children or their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren of those that hate me. So it's not really talking about the kids getting the guilt and the punishment for the sins committed by the parents. It's talking about the parents abusing the kids, sinning against the kids, and therefore creating a distorted view of God. Mm-hmm. You also get that in the repetition, by the way, of the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 9. You shall not bow down yourself to them or serve them, for I, the eternal your God, am a jealous God, visiting the sin of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me. Change the word upon to the other preposition against, visiting the sin of the parents against the children to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me. Okay? So that's what's really going on here. I hope that answers his question. I hope he watches tonight.
Right.
So, was that clear, William? Was that?
Yeah. I've never heard that before, but it's becoming more clear as I ponder it. So,
by the way, this problem of going from Hebrew to English and not being careful about prepositions affects translation in other places too. So you got to be really careful. You got to know your grammar, English and Hebrew. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have to know your grammar, and if you see a preposition used, you got to ask yourself, is that really the preposition that should be used there? And you might understand the verse differently as a result.
Right. Good point.
So.
Good point. I'm going to log into. Actually, the phone lines are already open. I didn't realize that. Phone lines are open. If you guys want to call in, 855.
I want to beat up the parents too. Jew who swings snakes.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Phone lines on your screen. If you want to call in, give us a call. 855-952-4253. Got to turn up here. So, all right, cool. All right. Well, that was definitely. It was definitely some new things I never caught on before. That's for sure.
Well, and some things we've beaten in the ground. We've discussed it so often.
That's okay though.
Yeah.
Yep. That's all right.
It's good to repeat.
Yep. So
let's see.
See any questions on YouTube? I'm not looking yet. I'm fixing to pull.
I'm looking. Larry, I'm not quite sure I agree with you. The rod in ancient times was for measurement, not weapon. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. We're comforted by the staff because that's how the shepherd, guides the sheep.
But the rod was discipline.
We're also, I'm sorry, what?
The rod was for discipline. The staff was for protection.
Exactly. But we're comforted by God because God cares about us. And if your parents don't care about you, they don't give you the rod either.
Right.
Okay, so we're comforted by God's love. We know that God loves us because God also gives us the rod, the punishment sometimes. Mm-hmm. That is one of the subtleties of the 23rd Psalm. Your rod and your staff comfort me. I am comforted by the fact that God loves me enough to correct me.
Right. I don't see any other questions, so if there's no questions popping up and no one wants to call in to say hi, then we may just call it an early night. First time in...
At least a few weeks.
Yeah. That's funny. All right. Well, it's looking like it's headed that way, boss. So you ready to call it an early night?
Sounds like you want an early night. It's fine by me.
Well, I can go either way. Definitely.
Let's see. Let me go back to the top of the comments real quick. Let's see. Deanna asks, what's an original sin? Like poking a badger with a spoon? Even teasing animals is an original. What Adam and Eve did isn't original either. Just kidding. Okay. Let's see.
John Riggs, does the prepositional phrase of those... Hold on, you scrolled up on me. Thanks, Andrea, for pointing that out, by the way. Does the prepositional phrase of those that hate me assume that the children were like their parents? That's a good question.
Well,
John Riggs. Caller, sit tight. We'll get with you just shortly, so don't hang up.
And the answer is it does, but it doesn't have to. Okay? Children only know what they are taught. And if our abusing children makes them hate God because we represent God to them, they're kids. What do they know? Mm-hmm. Okay. Then, they're going to learn to hate God. which is why God holds adults, to a high standard, doesn't want his name besmirched by our abusing kids.
Right.
But what it's saying there is they're going to punish the adults. Don't abuse kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a reference to the kids hating God. Start over. It is a reference to the kids hating God, okay, as a result of what the parents did. But the issue is the parents' behavior, not the kids hating God. When a kid goes to a different home and sees what love is, okay, they can understand that God isn't hate and abuse. They can they can learn their way out of those who hate me.
So basically, it's similar to when a child is alive and their parent is alive. The parents discipline the children,
And they're supposed to.
But once that child becomes the adult, and then he starts abusing the children, and his
right.
parent cannot discipline him, then Hashem steps in and takes over. When it comes to
right,
hurting the children or whatever the case may be. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so you ready to take this call?
I didn't know there was one. Sure.
Yes, sir. Okay, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hey, this is Robert Jones from Lancaster, California. Called about a month ago and asked
I was
Rabbi,
the rabbi in Lancaster, California.
You know what? I realized that. I think I Googled you and saw that, what is it, Bet Knesset Bamidbar over here?
That's it. I was there for 2 years. I was there 87 to 89.
Yeah, it's a really small world.
8, 9, 10, 11, 30, 33 years ago. Oh, God, I'm old. Okay.
Very good. Robert, what's your question?
Yeah, my question is, I don't think I've ever heard Rabbi Stuart Federow address this or Rabbi Tovia Singer. Within the Gospels, there's a complicated literary Greek structure. So if you were to compare the beginnings of the Gospels with the endings, they line up, and you can kind of label these ideas as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then you see many parallels between, like, the Old Testament with Moses, where he does 5 miracles, and then Jesus does 10 miracles, and they're doubled, and they're kind of have this complex mirroring. And so my question is, wouldn't this kind of be kind of evidence that it wasn't really a memory that they were recalling and writing, that there's actually like a complex structure to the way they did the story on purpose?
Yep. Look, you get that very clearly in the New Testament itself.
And we're talking about plagiarism, basically, right? That's what you're talking.
Well, not if
it's not necessarily plagiarism.
It's creating a story about Jesus to reflect what they saw in the Hebrew Scriptures. So Moses gives a speech on a mountain. Jesus gives a speech on a mountain. Moses is a lawgiver. Jesus is a lawgiver.
The babies die in the Old Testament.
They were trying to kill all the children with Moses. They tried to kill all the children with Jesus.
That's what I mean by plagiarism.
Yeah. Okay, can I show you something real quick?
Just putting a different wrapper on it. That's all it is, in my opinion.
Okay, let me find it.
What are we looking at?
That's a good question. I think it's 12.
Okay. All right. If you want, you can go and hang up and tune in for your answer. Robert, thank you for your call, sir.
Okay, you got it.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Well,
yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let me back up a step. Okay, and what is the phrase to use? The phrase is I
would ask you what that phrase is, but you clearly...
Matthew 21:5.
Okay. One. There you go.
Okay.
Coming up.
All right. Matthew 21:5. And I'm also going to need you to take a look at Um, and this one is see, if you don't look it up in the exact...
Not if you use Google. Google can be random. You can miss it by words. It'll still pick it up. Are you looking inside the software or on Google?
No, I'm looking in my Bible program.
Yeah, no, go to Google, look it up, because you'll find it real fast that way. Can you pull up a website?
Wait a minute. Google and Mark. Uh, 11:2.
Mark 11:2.
Yeah, but we're going to get there in a minute. So just stay with Matthew, okay?
Okay. Remind me of Mark 11:2 when you're ready.
All right. Well, yeah, I got to remember it. Okay. So this is the first time Jesus enters into Jerusalem. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
According to Matthew 21, read carefully. Do you have it up?
Yes.
Okay. So...
tell the daughter of Sion, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, meek and sitting upon an ass and a colt, the foal of an ass.
Right. So verse 21:2, go into the village over against you, and straightway you shall find an ass tied and a colt with her. How many animals?
Two.
2 animals.
Mm-hmm.
Loosen them, that means more than one,
mm-hmm.
and bring them, more than one, to me. And if any man says anything to you, you shall say, the Lord has need of them, and straightway he will send them. Okay? Then it says, all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, tell ye the daughter of Zion, behold, your king comes to you, meek and sitting upon an ass, and a colt, the foal of an ass. So here is a story of Jesus entering into Jerusalem the first time, and he's riding on 2 animals. And why is he riding on 2 animals? Because Matthew quotes a prophet who said, behold, your king comes to you, meek, sitting upon an ass, and a colt, the foal of an ass, and describes it as 2 animals. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Verse 6, and the disciples went and did as Jesus commanded them, and brought the ass and the colt, 2 animals, and put on them, 2 animals, their clothing, and they set him, Jesus, on it. Okay?
Okay.
Now take a look at whatever it was we just said about Mark.
Mark 10:5 maybe, or something like that.
I think that's right.
All right, let's see.
Mark 11:2.
Oh, 11. Oh, okay, I was close.
Yeah. Mark 11. Yep. Okay. And this is very important to read carefully here.
Sunscreen.
Okay. And when they came nigh to Jerusalem, to Bethpage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he sent forth 2 of his disciples and said to them, go your way into the village over against you, and as soon as you be entered into it, you shall find a colt tied, whereon never man sat. Loosen it and bring it, or loosen him and bring him. Singular.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If any man says to you, why are you doing this? Say you that the Lord has need of it, or him, and straightway he will send him or it hither. Always talking about 1 animal.
Right.
And they went their way and found the colt, only one, tied by the door without in a place where 2 ways met, and they loosened it. And certain of them that stood there said to them, what are you doing loosening the colt? And they said to them, even as Jesus had commanded, and they let them go. And they brought the colt, only one, to Jesus, and cast their garments on it, and he sat upon it. It's the same story.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is that according to Matthew, there are 2 animals. According to Mark, there's only 1 animal.
Right.
Now, when Matthew is talking about this was done in order to fulfill what the prophet said, he's talking about Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9.
Okay.
Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Zechariah 9, 9.
All right.
Okay. And here's the big question. I'm going back to what the caller said. Remember, this is all in response to the caller. Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt the foal of an ass. That's the verse. That's the quotation. The question becomes, was Zechariah talking about two animals, or was Zechariah talking about one animal?
Okay.
What do you think?
I would say one because of, I've heard it explained to me before using the Hebrew. But yeah, just one animal.
Why?
Because it's describing what stage of the ass it was in.
Okay, so riding upon an ass, which is a colt, the foal of an ass.
Right.
It's not talking about two animals, it's talking about one animal.
So why does the English translate to "and a colt of an ass," a colt?
Because it, tell you in a second.
I'm going to look it up in Hebrew too. Here, let's pull it up.
You bat Yerushalayim, hine yavo lecha tzadik v'nas hu oni v'rachav al chamor. And there's a vav there, okay? And so they translate the vav as an and. But it doesn't necessarily mean there are two animals.
Right.
And here's why. Okay? Let's try Psalm 19. It's quick and easy.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me finish pulling this up. Interesting.
Okay. Psalm 19.
Okay.
And go to 7 or 8.
All right.
And it's a verse we all know.
Okay.
Torah Hashem Tamima, Torah Hashem Tamima, Torah Hashem Tamima, Meshivat Nafesh. Okay, it's a song. All right?
Psalm 19.
Psalm 19, verse 7 or verse 8. The law of the eternal is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The law of the eternal is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the eternal is sure, making wise the simple. You got it?
Yep. What's up?
Okay. Hebrew poetry is parallelism. It is a rhyming of idea, not a rhyming of sound.
Okay.
So it doesn't rhyme like, like we think of a rhyme. It rhymes in idea. It's repeating the same concept, but in different words. And they're parallel to each other. The law of the eternal is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the eternal is sure, making wise the simple. The law of the eternal is perfect is parallel to the testimony of the Lord is sure.
But there's no vav here. There's no and. So how do you deal with that?
Because it doesn't matter. Wait a minute. Okay, it doesn't matter in poetry. The and doesn't change anything.
Okay.
It's still parallelism. The law of the Lord is perfect, is parallel to this testimony of the Lord is sure. Converting the soul becomes parallel to making wise the simple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, go back, if you want, to Zechariah 9:9. Okay. Okay. Riding upon an ass is parallel to upon a colt the foal of an ass. Zechariah was talking about one animal, not two, but he was speaking poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Daughter of Zion is parallel to daughter of Jerusalem. Rejoice greatly is parallel to shout.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Now, to be even more direct, even if it was talking about two, which it's not, but even if it was, the New Testament can't make up its mind either way. One says one says two.
But that's my point.
Yeah.
Okay, William, that's my point. This is my response to the gentleman who called, okay, whose call we just took.
Right.
The reason why Matthew writes his story about Jesus balancing himself on two different animals is because his interpretation of Zechariah 9:9 is that Zechariah is talking about two animals, so he invents his story about Jesus on two animals.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, on the other hand, understands Zechariah properly, that Zechariah is only talking about one animal, so he invents his story about Jesus, writing upon only one animal. The point is that what makes the story is not the facts of history. How did Jesus come into the Jerusalem the first time?
Right.
The story is based on their interpretation of a scripture in the Hebrew Scriptures, a verse in the Hebrew Scriptures, and so they invent their story to parallel the Zechariah 9:9 quote.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that goes to what he was asking about, that it's so set up to be parallel between the beginning and the end and parallel things about Moses, that it's a greater indication that it's an invention. Here's prime evidence that this was an invention.
Right.
Because it's not based on history, it's based on how each one understands Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9.
And that, my friend, has got us out of time. Rabbi, that was a great show, as usual.
Okay, hope so.
Yep, very good. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on notifications so you know. Today we didn't actually get to go live on Facebook. I don't know why. I went back to check the settings and everything looked like it was set right, but for some reason it didn't go through. So those who have not subscribed and turned on notifications would not have known that we were recording. So that's how that works. And don't forget Rabbi's book, Judaism and Christianity at Contrast. You can get it on Kindle as well. It's better to turn the pages, though. So if you got a chance to get that, go for it. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you all next week. Shavua Tov, everybody. Shavua Tov, Rabbi. Love you, man, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה